Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Merry Minds with Mary. I am Mary, and throughout the month of July, we are talking about limiting beliefs and nixing those beliefs. So, today's episode is all about eliminating those limiting beliefs by replacing them with something more accurate. So, when you identify a limiting belief, it's important to determine if this belief is true. The best way to determine this is, do you have evidence to support your claim? For example, if you sit there and say you have no time for scripture study, and yet you're spending 14 hours a day on Facebook, chances are you have time for scripture study. You're just not prioritizing the scripture study. So, identifying the limiting belief, establishing what evidence you have to support or contradict that limiting belief, and then replacing that limiting belief are all very important things. Our scripture today comes from Titus chapter 3. We have two verses we're looking at. The first one is Titus chapter 3, verse 3. At one time, we too were foolish, disobedient, deceived, and enslaved by all kinds of passions and pleasures. We lived in malice and envy, being hated and hating one another. And we're going to skip down to verse 14. Our people must learn to devote themselves to doing what is good, in order that they may provide for the daily necessities and not live unproductive lives. So what we're hearing from Paul here is that it's important to challenge those limiting beliefs that allow sin to grow and fester in our lives and replace them with thoughts that are true, so that we can act in a way that allows us to live with our purpose and for our purpose from God. When we are in alignment there, we move forward and upward. When we allow those limiting beliefs to come in, I don't want to go to church and sit next to Sally. She's annoying. Well, that's a limiting belief. Okay, Susan, go sit next to Sally. It's fine. If she's really that annoying, sit on the other side of the church, but go to church. Just go. It's fine. And allow Christ to soften your heart so that you find Sally less annoying in the future. At one point, we thought these limiting beliefs were true. We didn't know any better. But when we know better, we do better. Limiting beliefs hold you back. They hold you to sin. They hold you out of your purpose. It's not a good feeling. They distract you. Kind of like this cat about to walk on my... There we go. Keep moving. When you live with 4 cats, say hello, Sophia, you never know what's going to happen. So, it's like moving past the distractions. We also have to choose to move past the limiting mindsets. You have to live a life of intention and purpose. So intentionally identifying those limiting beliefs is important. That's the first step. The second step is to question what this belief is. Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf has stated that it's important to doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith, and I think that's so important for all of us. If you're living a life of limiting beliefs, you're not going to have as purposeful and productive of a life. It's just the reality. You're going to be too busy getting distracted. But when you decide to replace those limiting beliefs with true beliefs, with gospel doctrine, now we can move forward. And that's important. So how do we move forward? We move forward by, first of all, replacing those thoughts. How do you replace those thoughts? When you notice yourself thinking, I don't have time to do scripture study or prayer or whatever it is, stop and think to yourself, how do I spend my day? If I spend my day doing everything else and procrastinating on it, if I've got time for Facebook, if I've got time for TV, if I've got time to be gossiping on the phone, you've got time to be doing scripture study, prayer, whatever it is you're procrastinating on. You've got time if you prioritize it. So the next step is replace that limiting belief with a more correct belief. And the best way to do that is to come up with a phrase that directly contradicts the limiting belief. Instead of, I don't have time to, try something like, I choose to prioritize scripture study. And then write this down. That's the trick. You've got to write it down. There's power in the written word. The written word has so much power over your attitude. The next step is to put that written word, sticky note, pretty piece of paper that you wrote on, however you want to do it, somewhere where you're going to see it. That could be, make it the screen lock on your phone, make it something you see in your car, put it on your bathroom mirror, put it up by the door before you walk out the door, whatever you have to do. And then every time you see that statement, read it out loud. Because written word impacts you strongly, but so does spoken word. And when those two things come together, this is why we're told to read our scriptures, but also to memorize them and to speak of them frequently. Because when you do those two things, the scriptures take your mind and they develop it into something really great and powerful that God can use for his purpose. So this week, your challenge is, think of those limiting beliefs, write them down. That's the act of calling it out. And then write down any evidence you have that contradicts that statement. And then, step 3, replace that limiting thought with something more accurate and more true. And then read that statement out loud. If you do that, you will see yourself growing from that sinful mindset that Paul talked about in verse 3. You didn't know any better, so you allowed yourself to believe it. But now you know better. So the next step is to do better. And when you do those things, your life will move forward. You will be able to grow toward your purpose, and you'll be able to live with more purpose. And I think that's something we all desire. Have a merry day, and I'll see you next week.